Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll get started now. We're having our final Leaders in Healthcare event of this semester. And let's see. We're very excited to have our special guest tonight. Just a little bit about ViTAL. Our mission is to empower, inspire, connect, and create. And we are an interdisciplinary group of students on campus with a passion for healthcare innovation. I'm sure I see a lot of familiar faces, so you've probably heard this many times before. So we'll move right into an introduction of our speakers. I'm going to ask our lovely speakers, Matt and Aya, to introduce a little bit about themselves.
Sure. So, hey everyone, my name is Matt Swenson. I'm a fourth year computer engineering major at Northeastern. I'm also planning on doing a bioengineering master's once I finish my undergrad. And obviously my venture or my company that I started is SmartyPill. SmartyPill is an intelligent medication management system for seniors who routinely forget to take their medication.
Awesome, and I'm Aya. I graduated from MIT in 2018. I majored in mechanical engineering and minored in architecture design. My company is called Aavia. I started it when I was a junior at MIT, and Aavia is a hormone health brand, and we're optimizing physical and mental health for people according to their hormone cycle, and we do that through a smart birth control pill case and a cycle tracker app.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. I guess I'll get right into the questions. We're going to start kind of generally with what drew you towards entrepreneurship, and either of you can start.
Sure.
I guess I can.
Go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead. Okay, I guess I'll start. So I think initially what drew me towards entrepreneurship, well, first of all, my initial exposure to entrepreneurship was through the Entrepreneurs Club. I met the former president, Quinn Litherland, at a table event on Centennial a couple years ago. And that sort of drew me into the Entrepreneurs Club and Husky Startup Challenge. But what sort of drew me towards entrepreneurship in general was that I was getting increasingly frustrated that what I was learning in classes and just my learning style in classes wasn't really what I actually wanted to learn. There were a lot of, course requirements and whatnot. And I know, obviously, if you take a major, there are certain course requirements, but I really wanted to step outside of the classes that I took and explore some of my other passions. And so being a creative person, I've always wanted to find ways to improve my life and the lives of others. I know it sounds cliche, but it's really true. And again, the Entrepreneurs Club was the first organization, obviously not the only one, but it was the first one that I found on campus that I felt really accepted me and my various passions and strengths and really accepted me for who I was. And so I felt like I really fit in, and that sort of drew me towards them.
Yeah, for me, it kind of came by accident almost. I applied for this program at MIT that basically brought 15 students over to Hong Kong, where we can work with 15 other students there. And this was the first program that I attended that wasn't just like engineering students. They invited students from the grad school and also from the business school at MIT. And then we also worked with Hong Kong students from a lot of different types of departments. And the whole point of the program was to create a hardware product. We got to visit some factories in Shenzhen in China. And we also took some really introductory courses on business. And that was really the first time that I knew anything about entrepreneurship and how it worked. I myself was already really interested in the hardware space. So being able to learn new skills as well as work on the hardware side of things was really exciting to me. I also did intern for a startup itself, and I just really liked the fast pace, very hands-on environment that they had. So even if I wasn't going to start a startup, I wanted to at least work for one. So that's how I started.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. So I know you both explained a little bit about your companies, but just kind of getting more into it, what was your big idea and what was the problem that you saw that you felt you needed to solve? And also, how did you know you had the right idea going forward?
I can jump in there. So for me, it really did come from like my personal experience, especially when it comes to hormone health and hormone cycles and periods and menstruation and things like that. It's something that we don't really talk about a lot. And I myself started getting a lot of migraines while I was a student. And I never knew like when they were going to come. At some point, my migraines got so bad that you know, went to MGH because I started losing my vision. And when after going through so many tests and different types of doctors, they still couldn't quite figure out what was happening. And they just told me to stress less, which is like the least helpful advice to a college student. But as I started tracking and learning more about my own cycle, I actually realized that my migraines came right before my period, and I had what was called menstrual migraines. And it just took me so long to even figure out that point that I knew there must be other, you know, menstruators out there that probably don't understand like their cycles as well. Especially as we started interviewing more and more people about the product and the idea, we did realize that a lot of birth control pill users use the pill to not only prevent pregnancy, but more so to like help with their mental health or to help with acne or to help with another hormonal disorder. And it was just something that wasn't really talked about, and a lot of not a lot of education around. So that was something that I felt really passionate about bringing, you know, more light to. So we are starting with the birth control pill users first, because they already have some sort of hormone problem that they're dealing with. So that's something that was exciting to me. But we did test a lot of the concepts of the ideas by having a website with just a sign up page on there. We ran some Facebook ads at that time to see if this concept of a product was something that people were interested in. You know, we did some messaging tests on there and collected a bunch of emails and knew that there was at least some interest or demand to it. And that's kind of how we started creating the product and be more serious about it.
So for SmartyPill, I mean, initially, I don't think that we knew we had the right idea. So medication adherence isn't really like a new problem. You know, like SmartyPill isn't the first to market for something like this. But there were a lot of interesting things that I saw in the way the market was, you know, currently, or the way the market was a couple of years ago, and sort of what hoops or some of the complexities in that market, you know, that I felt that SmartyPill could address. And one of them, which obviously is a big sort of topic today, is increasing affordable access to, you know, any type of care, any type of service. So there, I forget the exact stat, but you know, something around 50% of people don't buy one of these pill dispensers because they're too expensive. And so initially, it really, for me, it really started off as a engineering project first. It wasn't really startup, wasn't really a company. But after, I guess I'll tell this short story. So after my freshman year of college, there was an online competition. If you guys have ever heard of the website called hackster.io, it's basically an online makerspace where people can post any sort of engineering project they want. And after I posted SmartyPill to this website, there's a competition that gave people the chance to compete in China for a global product design competition. And so it turned out that we won, and we got to go to the finals and compete. And sort of that was for me, that was the impetus or the motivation, or sort of the signal that told me, hey, you know, people really believe in what we're doing, and people really are taking an interest in the approach that SmartyPill is taking to solve this problem. And so again, you know, I didn't really know that it was the right idea. Again, it started off as an engineering project, but I think, you know, after that sort of outside validation, and after going through, you know, Northeastern's entrepreneurial ecosystem and refining our idea, I feel like SmartyPill is now at the point where we know where we're going, and we know the pain point in the market, the existing market that we want to tackle.
Wow, both your stories were amazing and you're doing incredible things. I was just wondering if you guys are actually working on any projects currently or continuing to work on your companies.
So I think, in terms of other projects, like in terms of other involvements on campus, I'm doing consulting for VVC, which is a program at ViTAL, so small world. But outside of that, I'm also working on the Hyperloop and Boring teams. For those who don't know, the Boring company is one of the companies from Elon Musk, which is focused on digging safe and efficient tunnels to increase or to reduce transportation congestion. And Hyperloop is a sort of concept also proposed by Elon Musk to radicalize the change in transportation. So I'm working on both of those, but you're sort of involved in those organizations. But aside from that, I do have a lot of startup ideas from time to time, but generally I just write them down in my notes, and sort of have them for future use. Not necessarily working on them right now.
I currently do Aavia full time since I graduated, so that's basically my life right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what were some resources, they can be incubators, mentorship programs, venture accelerators, that made a difference in your journeys, and how did you find them and how did they help you?
Yeah, I definitely took advantage of a lot of things in school. The first program that we went to with the Hong Kong, the entrepreneurship program was one. We did another one called MIT Fuse, which was a winter entrepreneurship session as well, at the business school. We did Delta V, which is another summer program, that at the end of it, you have a demo day and you're presenting your company ideas. We got grant funding like through MIT Sandbox too. So we did a lot of things like within the school and what they offered, and really took advantage of all the resources there. And that definitely did make a huge difference because, my co-founders and I recognize that we were in this really privileged situation. We, there was good connections like through the school. The professors obviously knew, what they were doing. There's professors that had their own companies, and we, had coffee chats with them to understand like how they started their own startups, and just found a lot of inspiration like through that community too. We also did do Mass Challenge Health Tech. So basically, it's a Boston incubator accelerator, where they match company startups with like bigger companies in healthcare, or like pharmacies or pharmaceutical companies and whatnot. So we were matched with one of the healthcare providers there, which also like mentored us throughout the process and got us a little bit more involved in the healthcare space. And there's a good Slack channel of healthcare like startups that share their resources, that share their doctor networks with us, which was definitely very helpful.
So for me, pretty much all of the resources that I've utilized, so far have come from Northeastern, come from on-campus resources, and there's really a lot. Generally, they're under the umbrella of Mosaic, which is Northeastern sort of collection of entrepreneurial organizations and resources on campus. So I guess I can just sort of list them off. So the first one for me was Entrepreneurs Club, and more specifically, the Husky Startup Challenge, which was one of the programs of that organization. And that really sort of gave me the concept of HSC is bringing you from idea to sort of a fully functional business within one semester. And so that was immensely helpful in sort of formally thinking about, how can SmartyPill go from an engineering project, again, like I said, to to an actual business, one that makes money and all that. And then after the Husky Startup Challenge, the Husky Startup Challenge really opened sort of the rest of Mosaic up to me at least in my experience. So from HSC, we went to Scout, which is Northeastern's product design studio. And we worked with Scout to sort of develop our brand and our logo. We also worked with Generate, which is Northeastern's product development studio. And that was instrumental in developing our hardware and software, the actual implementation of it. And then also IP Collab. So IP Collab offers some legal services for ventures, and especially since going into healthcare, there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of legal matters that you have to handle. IP Collab was really helpful in drafting some of that and helping me out with that.
I also want to add, one thing that was also helpful for us was talking to business school students. I think usually there isn't enough like collaboration between like the undergrad and the grad schools and the business schools. And like I met a bunch of business school students through the first Hong Kong program, and that opened my eyes to a lot of things. And they're older, they have more experience, they have work experience, so like learning from them as well. And that's actually where I found our co-founder and current CEO. She was from the business school, so I encourage like you guys to also start talking to them or interacting with the older students too.
Yeah, it sounds like you both met incredible people through the resources you use. So what would you say you look for in your mentors, whether those are like other business students or people you meet in eClub, anything like that?
And so,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Aya.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, definitely like the business school students, there are incredible people that have started startups before, or they've done something similar before, have a connection to somewhere. We did a lot of researching of our professors too. They usually have a secret, background of some awesome thing that they might not necessarily share with you. So I would encourage that. It just helps with a lot of the inspiration part, because I think sometimes it can feel so difficult and so lonely sometimes that it's helpful to reach out to people who have done something before, who can empathize with you on the journey, and whatnot too. And some professors also like angel invest in companies too. So those professors, we have 2 professors who ended up becoming angel investors of our company as well.
So for me, it really depends, or it really depended on sort of what stage we were at. I think now, sort of what I look in a mentor is someone who, has healthcare experience, or, experience in that industry, and sort of being able to guide, being able to guide me through a lot of the, regulation and a lot of the considerations that have to be taken into account when you're developing a medical device. But I think initially, really what the only really thing I looked in a mentor is someone who, someone who was also an entrepreneur, someone who had maybe, started another business, or started, or just had experience working at a startup, like on co-op. And I think, it was really simple. Like I didn't have a lot of sort of requirements from that perspective, but having just, again, initially having any person with business experience or entrepreneurship experience was really helpful, in sort of getting SmartyPill to the point where it is now. And obviously now in the future, we're sort of looking for mentors who, have more dedicated healthcare experience and can help us go further.
Well, thank you both. Were there any mistakes that you made that you think others can learn from?
I think rather than mistakes, there are a couple things I learned, or like, I guess, mistakes, but maybe more so, again, things I learned, or what not to do. So just personally for me, I sort of, advise people to perhaps not do 3 different accelerators or programs in one semester, along with classes, along with searching for your first co-op. It's a little more work than it sounds. Actually, it's a lot more work. And obviously, yeah. So that maybe don't do that. But I think the bigger piece, and the sort of one that's more generally applicable, is don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to start from scratch or restart from scratch. I can think of plenty of times in the development of SmartyPill and just my entrepreneurial journey where I had to take a hard look at what I was doing and sort of bite the bullet and restart development on a particular aspect of SmartyPill, or sort of restart or sort of reframe the entire problem that we're solving, or just again starting over when it's necessary. I think a lot of people are afraid of failure. A lot of people are afraid of taking that risk of starting over and sort of looking at it with new eyes. But I think again, I don't think people should be afraid of that. I think what you learn so much from starting over and looking at it with a fresh mind. And so that's sort of what I would say is something I've learned throughout my journey.
Matt, I cannot agree with you more. People always say like, don't be so attached to your idea because things change, and you learn a lot from talking to like your potential customers, and maybe that's not something that they want, and it's okay. Like as long as you know that, and you can iterate on your product or the service you're providing, just keep learning. It's okay to start over and start from scratch. I think initially, since I studied engineering too, I also thought that like a product equals a company, but there's still so much more to a company than the product itself. And especially as we think about our company, we're thinking about branding, we're thinking about community. So just, like one single product isn't going to make you into a company that lasts for years. So there are a lot of components to think about. And in a similar vein, also knowing that you yourself like can't do everything. It's important to find other people that are equally as passionate and have different skill sets from you. A lot of startups tend to find like their friends or people that always agree with them to create a company like with them, but that's not necessarily always good. You want someone to challenge you and disagree with you, so that you can really create, something that customers actually want. So that was a big learning for me too.
And I guess one thing I'll add on to that is that I've often heard that investors or just VC in general, they don't invest in the product, they invest in the people, they invest in the team. And if you have a extremely strong team, but you might not have the best implementation of your product at that point, it's better to have a strong team, because then they will know that you're able to execute on your plan and execute on your idea. I think one of the biggest things is, again, finding a strong team and finding people that complement your skills. Because, I've very rarely heard of anyone who can run a company by themselves. Maybe, initially as a sort of mini startup, but, I have sort of yet to see someone who runs a company entirely by themselves that's sort of, that is high growth and reaches a lot of people.
I heard that the average like co-founder size is like 2 or 3 people to start a company. So very rarely do startups that have only one person, actually get funding and things like that. So that was something that was interesting too. But yeah, speaking of investors as well, like I think at first we really tried to satisfy every investor we talked to, but not every investor is like good for your company. You have to build a relationship with them too. And we've heard a lot of horror stories from other founders where the investors like ended up taking, a lot of ownership of their company, or having too much say into the company. And it's okay to disappoint some investors if you don't feel like it's a good fit. It can be very tempting to take people's to get money from the investors, but if you don't agree or feel like there's a good connection with the investor, it's okay for you to also reject them, because it should be a two-way relationship.
Well, thank you both. It seems like you've just learned so much, and thank you for sharing that with our students. Was kind of going off that, I know you mentioned a lot about your journeys, but was there anything else that surprised you along the way that you can share with everyone else?
So this might seem obvious to many people on the call, but coming from my perspective as a computer engineer, someone who really before sophomore year really didn't have much exposure to the healthcare industry and sort of the way that worked, was that sort of one thing that surprised me was that the standard for medical devices is so much higher than traditional hardware or software products, or traditional maybe mental health apps, or traditional apps that aren't necessarily like liable for a person's life or a person's well-being. um, for obvious reasons, there's a lot of liability and a lot of regulation that comes along with that. And so I think that can deter a lot of people. But for me, that sort of was the biggest thing that surprised me, is that how much work needs to go into developing something like that. And I think the other thing is that so I guess in my, people may think differently, but in my view, entrepreneurship isn't just like a club you're involved in, or just a group that you talk to. It's really a mindset. It's like if you're starting your own business, and if you're and if you want to continue that business, especially out of college, once you sort of maybe lost access to a lot of the free resources that are on campus, it really is a mindset. You have to sort of make your entire sort of being revolve around entrepreneurship and thinking outside the box, and sort of having that relentless, or that sort of relentless commitment to whatever you're working on. And I think especially to a lot of students who maybe see like classes and say, oh, I don't really like this class, but it's only one semester, so I'll live through it. Like that's not the same with sort of entrepreneurship, starting a business. Like if you don't like it, you're just like, if you start your business, like until if it fails, but until it does, it's a never ending it's a never ending commitment. It's never ending cycle of motivating yourself to do it. And so I think those were the two biggest pieces that I learned from going through my journey and going through all of the entrepreneurial organizations on campus.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the legal side of things. There's a lot of legal stuff you have to go through, and lawyers are expensive. A large chunk of us like fundraising just went straight to our lawyers, which was unfortunate, but necessary. With healthcare, you do have to think about stuff like HIPAA compliance. You're dealing with patient data. Privacy is a big concern. We've even thought about implementing telehealth, for example, into our app, and some startups have like a dedicated telehealth lawyer in their startups to implement a feature. You have to pass through a lot of laws. States have different laws, like from the federal level. It's very complicated. Healthcare in America in general is a mess. So it can be very challenging. We also did write a patent for our product as well too. So that itself was pretty challenging. But I think what's also great about healthcare is that you do make a pretty impactful impact to people that use your product, because it really does involve like their health and wellness. So I would say like all of that is worth it. I'm almost glad that I didn't know how much work it was, or else I don't know if I would have started it. But like I definitely think it's worth it. A second thing was also just how supportive the founder community is. We started a lot of WhatsApp chats or Slack groups with other founders in our portfolio companies from our investors, and people are always like willing to help each other. So I I always thought like, oh, I'm gonna take like 15 minutes of someone's busy schedule, and I almost hesitated from reaching out to other founders. But usually people are very helpful, responsive. They know they're going through the same stuff as you, and there's a lot of I feel like entrepreneurs in general just like to learn a bunch of things and learn from each other. So don't hesitate to reach out to other people for help and experience and hear their experience too.
Well, thank you. I feel like we focused a lot on like the great things you've already accomplished, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? So going kind of into the future.
So, yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. So I think, I mean, obviously my sort of default answer, the answer that I would put as my first option is, continue to work on SmartyPill and, launch it and still be a co-founder in SmartyPill after I graduate. Hopefully still after 5 years. But I think if that doesn't work out, like I mentioned before, a lot of times like I just write down startup ideas randomly. Whether whether I'm doing homework or working at co-op, something will just pop into my head and I'll write it down. So I'll try and tackle one of those problems, and just sort of see where that leads me. But I think sort of aside from that, if I decide that I want to sort of go the more like corporate route and instead of starting my own company, try and still work at a company I'm very passionate about, or work for a mission that I'm very passionate about. I would say my sort of dream job would be to work on the Apple Watch R&D team, because I really, and people always call me an Apple fanboy, but I'm really like, it's really impressive how the Apple Watch and just the amount and just the level with which it brings sort of like healthcare and sort of like biohacking data, for people who just want a bunch of data about their health and about themselves. It's amazing that they're able to take so many metrics and so many sensors and whatnot, and just sort of pack it into a consumer device that's somewhat readily available. And so again, increasing access to this ever-growing system of connected devices, and metrics and biometrics and whatnot. I'm really, really passionate about that. So that would be my sort of backup, or not backup, but dream job, if either SmartyPill or some other startup didn't work out.
I'm so impressed, Matt, that you have like a backup plan behind your backup plan, because I can't even imagine what it's going to be like next year, to be honest. But hopefully, I do want to continue working on Aavia for as long as possible. This is like my 4th year working on Aavia, and I never would have thought that I would still be working for this. But so I do hope to see myself like working on that. I think entrepreneurship itself is very fun. I would love to work on another startup if that's not the case. But yeah, I would hope to continue working on Aavia.
All of that sounds incredible. It sounds like you both are just very busy people putting your all into your companies, but also doing a million things on the side. So how do you kind of find that motivation? Because you're doing so much and like just being so productive pretty much 24/7.
So I think for me, I think that like the first small piece is that if others, like if close friends or other people close to me are as excited about something as I am, that really gets me going. I sort of oftentimes I can sort of feed off the motivation or the excitement of others, and that sort of, especially being in Mosaic and being in all these entrepreneurial organizations, that's been a big part. But I think the other thing is, specifically for SmartyPill and specifically for the healthcare industry, I've been personally affected by it in a lot of different ways. There's an organization or a camp, a sleepaway camp for kids with rare and chronic illnesses in Ashford, Connecticut. And being a camper there for 5 years really exposed me to like a huge number of kids who, um, can't really live normal lives, or sort of can't go to other sleepaway camps because of their illness. And that's sort of pushed me or sort of motivated me to say, like, I'm very privileged and very fortunate to be in the situation that I am now. And so I feel like it's sort of my duty or sense or my mission to help those people and to help them stay healthy lives and to help them live, and help them, live. And so that's sort of the piece that has sort of motivated me throughout my life, and then combined with, obviously, like I mentioned before, sort of having close friends motivating me especially in college once I joined all these Mosaic organizations. Those are the two things that really keep me motivated.
Yeah, for me is talking to our customers and hearing from them like what the impact our company or product like made on them. That's always very inspirational. We have our top, fans of our company, and they definitely bring us a lot of energy. I also, in fact, like still talk to our angry customers too, because they're angry because they really care about what you're creating, and they're very passionate in that way. So usually getting on the phone with them, like letting them rant, and then, being there not just to cancel their complaints, but being there to understand and hear them out. They usually end up, calming down and telling you exactly what they want out of your product and company. And it's great to have this type of energy from people. I think the worst is when people feel neutral and they don't care about what you're doing. I definitely talking to other founders, people, amazing things that other people have done. I also like to listen to podcasts like How I Built This. I think a lot of people, you guys might know it too. But it's always inspirational to hear how people like started, and where they are now. They all started very confused and not knowing anything, or stumbling along the way, and they made it. So being able to hear that is definitely very inspirational.
Thank you both. So at ViTAL, we kind of have a lot of people passionate about healthcare innovation. So do you have any advice for aspiring healthcare entrepreneurs going forward?
I mean, I think first of all, like everyone here is in the right place. Everyone here is, at this event, and so if you're interested in this event, then again, you're on your way to success, I would say. Obviously, the second easy piece is get involved with ViTAL. I sort of discovered ViTAL at the beginning of this school year, so beginning of my fourth year, and really it's sort of opened a lot of doors and given me a lot of different perspectives, and I really enjoy being a part of it. And I think the final piece, which sort of touched on what Aya and I said earlier, was that you shouldn't be, or don't be deterred by the seemingly intense development and regulation when it comes to medical devices specifically. I think, again, a lot of people don't realize it going in, what they're up against, like sort of similar to me. But with that said, I think ViTAL is one of the few like organizations on campus that's dedicated to a specific industry in entrepreneurship because it has its own unique challenges. And so I think, it's sort of a small world. I know a lot of different people in ViTAL, and sort of we all know each other. It's a really nice community. And so I think more generally speaking, we're all here to help. And we're all here to offer our knowledge and our expertise to help you, whether you're an entrepreneur just in general, or if you want to pursue some sort of healthcare related project.
Yeah, I think there are more resources in college than you probably think. Clubs like these obviously are really great. There are professors probably that worked in medical devices, or have worked at a pharmacy before, or a pharmaceutical company before. I think like reaching out to them, hearing their stories, interning for a company, a healthcare company. I think that opens up a lot of doors. Another thing that in terms of like building a doctor network, I thought was pretty interesting was that there's a lot of doctors on Instagram now that are always talking about, that are there to spread information and education, and following them, reaching out to them. They're usually there and doing this as a part-time thing because they're so passionate about healthcare in the space. So, and they're already like tech focused and forward thinking. Reaching out to them and following them, it was definitely like very interesting. In fact, one of our medical advisors now, like she's a TikTok queen, OB-GYN. So, like surround yourself with people that care about what you're working with too.
Well, thank you both for answering my questions. I'm going to open it up to our student audience to ask any questions you'd like. Feel free to unmute or just type it in the chat. And yeah, I can also read off questions if you want to type them in the chat.
I have a question. This was a great panel, Matt and Aya. I think one of the things that Matt touched on, which I like can't stop thinking about, is that, because we're still in school, right? And so we're still learning a lot about healthcare and science and medicine and then all the legal aspects and regulations. And like, how do you like mentally get past that? Because like, I don't want to say like imposter syndrome, but there's like so many like things you need to learn essentially, I guess. And like in healthcare, right, there's like all this schooling required to reach certain professions, which may or may not be the case in other professions. Just wondering, yeah, how did y'all deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was pretty lucky in that the CEO, that our current CEO, she used to work in healthcare. She was a healthcare consultant. So we definitely took a lot of her knowledge. We talked to other healthcare founders and startups, and learned how they went through it. There are a couple of these startup founders who have like a list of regulations or whatnot, and these things that we should be thinking about, which was helpful. We didn't know about HIPAA compliance, for example, until we started it. We like educated ourselves of like what other startups did and what kind of mistakes they might have made, to kind of propel us forward. And yes, it's there's no denying that it's going to be difficult, but I think having this mindset of like you're there to learn a bunch of things, and you're there to like fail, because you don't learn until you fail. So I think it's okay to like stumble through it and not know everything when you're going into it, and like be there to learn things. And I think a lot of college students think that startups are like founded by other young people, but the truth is that there are a lot of the most successful startups are actually founded by people in their 30s or 40s. So you don't really have to rush into it and start. And maybe it's not good coming from me as someone who did start like out of college, but that's why a lot of people in our company, are in their 30s or 40s. They have that experience. They're there to teach you. There is no rush. And I think like taking the time to, have more experience, but interning somewhere and learning, and then like later wanting to pursue a startup, like that's also definitely a path too.
It's funny that you asked that, Chris, because I've been sort of thinking sort of, how can, how can I get, or how can, ViTAL get, or how can just in general, how can we get more people interested in healthcare innovation? Again, I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people look at the regulations, they look at, the somewhat, like the red tape, they look at the development process and the liability. And they sort of get deterred. But I've as I've sort of gone through this, I've tried to sort of compile in my head, which now that I think about it, I should probably write this down and share it. Is sort of like a kind of like a one-stop shop or an interactive guide to sort of healthcare. And obviously, I'm not knowledgeable about everything. I don't claim to be, but I think a big piece about it is just knowing what the heck all of these acronyms and all of these resources are. And I think, it's easy to take 3 years worth of Google searches and 3 years worth of gathering resources and sort of compile that into one place. I think a lot of, I think a lot of it is sort of spread out. You sort of have to ask people for these resources, but in my mind, I think it would really be cool if there was some app or some other way with which college students could sort of have a one-stop shop for access to all these different healthcare resources, especially described in simple terms. I think people obviously once you get into it, you might need a lawyer to explain to you what something actually means. But I think if you have a general idea of a particular regulation like HIPAA or a particular rule that you have to follow, just in simple terms, I think it makes it easier to understand and lowers the barrier of understanding, of lowers the barrier of entry of people who of college students who just want to get started and just want to learn a couple things about healthcare and about entrepreneurship.
I just remembered another resource that we took advantage of when we were in college was, I believe it's the BU entrepreneurship club or something like that. I can send a follow-up or something if you guys want to look into it. But basically, they are a student BU law school students that give you free entrepreneurship advice, which is really great. They offer it to other students in the area too. And those students are learning throughout the process, so they may not be the 100% resource, but at least they have a base knowledge that maybe you don't have. So we actually learned a lot from them about even stuff like incorporating a company or how to start a patent. They taught us about HIPAA stuff too. So taking advantage of those free resources, or lawyer office hours, for example, for law school students could be helpful too.
Anyone else have a question? Oh, it looks like Elisa had one in the chat. What's the first next step you would recommend after someone comes up with an initial idea for a company, startup, or product?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because Northeastern has the perfect program for that. I think there's in many ways, there's sort of a consensus in terms of how you go through at least the initial steps of validating your startup, and sort of validating the problem, making a solution or making a minimum viable product, continuously validating. So I think the next step after you come up with an idea and you want to see is this viable, do market research, search, see, gather some statistics, see what the problem is, see who is affected by that problem the most. Oftentimes the biggest, I think my biggest piece of advice would be, you're not your own customer. And even if you're a college student coming up with and you have an idea that is also targeted towards college students, you shouldn't be your own validator, if that makes sense. It's really, really important to be customer obsessed and to look out to, or to like interview other people to see if it's really a problem, because the problem you're experiencing might only be felt by you and might only be experienced by you, and maybe, you know, not so much the rest of the population. So yeah, I think, you know, at least the initial next steps would be, you know, doing some market research, finding who does this problem affect the most, and then going out, reaching out to those people, you know, interviewing them, seeing if they actually validate your problem, and then if they do, you know, then you can start to go into developing a solution and making, you know, a minimum viable product and creating a business model. But I think before you do any of that, you have to validate your idea. You know, if you just sort of think it's the best idea in the world without validating, you know, more often than not, it leads to, you know, it leads to your idea not being validated, and so it generally can lead to failure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's you know, there's primary market research, which is, you know, research you do by talking directly to potential customers and doing user tests with them. For example, if you have even a prototype of an idea, you can show that prototype to them. You know, if you have a website, you could show them a website, like a concept of, you know, what you have, just get initial reactions from people and hear them out. And then there's secondary market research, which is essentially like Googling things, looking at articles, looking at your competitors, what they're doing, and seeing like where you could potentially fit in that space. And I think that's, you know, that validating at least through that to start can be immensely helpful. I would also say like finding other people who are interested in the idea too, to join your team. You know, again, like this is not something that you can do like by yourself. The more support that you have, finding a co-founder is like essentially like marriage. You know, you're finding someone that you're going to stay with for a long time, and you know, you want to date around, find, you know, get some feelers of people that are, you know, willing to join you, and, you know, start building relationships with people.
I had a quick last question, just because we're short on time, but I'm interested in, this has nothing to do with your companies necessarily, but you're clearly both extremely busy. What keeps you sane? Like, what do you do for fun? I'm assuming you do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important question, because I think when it comes to startups and founders, there's always this culture of like, you have to be busy, you have to work 24/7, you have to work until you burn out. Like, and there's, you know, people like think that that's the way it should be, but I don't think that's healthy at all. I think you should take breaks. You know, you should find time like to hang out with your family. We like force people to take breaks in our company too. So, you know, I appreciate that question. For me, I think it's definitely changed like through the pandemic. You know, I usually like would hang out with friends and stuff like that, but right now I've been doing a little bit more like creative stuff, I guess, to like knitting and sewing and things like that. So I enjoy that kind of stuff, things that I don't really get to do at work. So that's what I do.
So I might have a different opinion on this, just because, you know, I think I have a different perspective on this. But for me, my idea of fun is like doing more work or learning other things or learning new things. Often, like throughout college and throughout, you know, high school and throughout my life, really, I've always wanted to, like, you know, sort of get, like, sort of be knowledgeable in as many different topics as possible. You know, like I think the weirdest thing to someone who, you know, might not know me is that, you know, obviously I'm working on SmartyPill. You know, I'm a huge, you know, healthcare entrepreneurship really is one of my passions. But you know, another passion is, you know, I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. I'm a huge fan of SpaceX. You know, I'm a huge fan of and interested in so many different things that for me, you know, the way I sort of keep saying, I guess you could say, is, you know, when I'm not working on SmartyPill, or, you know, on a co-op, I try to sort of like learn something else in a different area that I'm passionate about. Because, you know, if SmartyPill fails or if something happens, then like, I feel like I can easily just sort of pick up sort of where I left off, if that makes sense. So again, I know I have a different perspective on things, but generally, you know, my free time consists of watching a lot of YouTube videos and trying to learn about as many different things as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you both so much. We are going to kind of conclude today's event. So I'll just share my screen real quick. Okay, let's see. Okay. So again, thank you so much to our speakers for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. And thank you everyone for joining us at our last Leaders in Healthcare event for the semester. We have one last event next Thursday, which is going to be a really fun community engagement event that we hope you all can join us at. And of course, don't miss out on any of our updates. So follow us on Instagram, feel free to email us, and you can join our newsletter by scanning the QR code. And if you would like to share this event, it will be up on our YouTube channel soon. So hope everyone has a great night. Thank you again so much for joining us. And yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.